Now they coming to live, Spirit and Coffee. Got the coffee here. So good. Make sure you stay hydrated. Drinking water, so lovely. Yummo, yummo. All right, so let's get started about co-creation and really allowing yourself to be in a space where you can join forces with people who have a shared vision like you. Now, this, of course, doesn't happen. It doesn't happen overnight. It's not something that is easy. It's basically, and the reason I say easy, it might be easy for some people, but when you are 100% committed to God and God's work, and you're walking the path, it's easy when you do it alone. It's easier because you don't have to. You're just by yourself. You're not with another individual sharing the same 100% the same vision through God's eyes, or through, how do I want to say it, through the connection of the God self. And so it becomes a challenge to understand, right? And what I want to talk about mostly, and I'm trying to articulate it, and I might stumble over words and a way to express it because it's all new for me. It's a new way of understanding the world. It's all a whole new dynamic that I've never been able to experience, which is beautiful because that's what life is about. It's experiencing new things all the time, right? As I talked about before, we always are changing, ever evolving into our new selves. Nothing's never going to stay the same, right? And we're always beginners, especially if you're a spiritual alchemist. So if you are a true alchemist and you're following alchemy, you'll know that you're always a beginner, and that things can shift and change, and your perception can shift and change based on new information, right? Why? Because we know what we know what we don't know, but we don't know what we don't know. And the don't know what we don't know is kind of the black box. It's sort of the space where we have no idea what's going on, or what information might be available to us, or how we can perceive the world from a whole new lens, and a whole new base of understanding, a whole new base of knowledge and wisdom that lies within a different spectrum, which would be co-creation. Now, co-creation is a little different because it's a shared vision between two individuals, and it can expand out. So for me, it's something new. I'm treading on something new, and I know that because of it, you guys will see that there's going to be a whole new dynamic with Spirit and Coffee, and it's just a little bit deeper, and it's beautiful because it's going to, I believe, support under the understanding of individual people on how to have healthy relationships, how to work through God, as two individuals move together through God, and that is huge. There's different things that happen when you're 100% committed to this work through God. You can, and some people will like go to church together. They'll say prayer together, but when their life is 100% committed to God's grace or God's miracle or God's vision, it's a little bit different because every day is God first, and every day the individual puts God before the other person. If it's not God, I don't want it. That's what I always say. If it's not God, then not saying that everything isn't God, because everything is, but in the name of God is what I should say. If things aren't done in the name of God, then it's a distortion, and that's okay. But for me, I want to be able to co-create with somebody in God's image, in God's name. And so how do we do that? So I'm stumbling, like I said, on words, or stumbling on ways to articulate it. It will come to me. The language will come to me to be able to express it. But it's new territory. And so if you guys have any insights, please let me know. There's a couple of systems that I'm looking at how to co-create in partnership with another individual through God's lens. What does that look like? And how do we co-create that way? Because again, it was just me, myself, and me doing this vision of spirit and coffee and expanding on what I feel gets to happen next. But when you have another individual come up and see the vision and is 100% aligned and in alignment and starting to work towards that same vision, it starts to expand. It's different. The co-creation is different. We're dealing with a whole new individual with a different personality, with different ways of seeing the world and viewing the world, and having their own knowledge base and their own wisdom that they bring to the table, and then understanding how to get through the actual physical part of a relationship, right? So we have the spiritual, which is always coexist together in harmony. When you have a spiritual partner, right? Someone that you jive with spiritually, that always seems to go good because it's in the eyes of God, the name of love. And then when we come back down to earth with our bodies and our minds and everything that's put within this time space, that now we are dealing with sort of personalities, and personalities sometimes don't jive. And so how do you get through those things when you're trying to create something in God's image, right? How do you let the ego sort of take a back seat and allow God to come through every time there's something that's conflicting or is not making sense or is distorted or feels like it's coming from not a place of true love or heart, right? Where it's that pure love through God. And so we have these archetypes show up, and we have these personalities show up, and they want to fight for the ego, and they want to be right, and they want to look good, and they have worthiness conversations and everything that we carry with us in this time space. And now you're dealing with the other individual and their stuff, and you're trying to figure it out together. So it becomes this really interesting dynamic. And what I'm learning about it is that there's this ebb and flow, the give and the receive. So if you're in practice with a spiritual partner, and by that I mean anybody who's spiritual with you. It could be a friend at church, it could be your best friend, it could be your lover, it could be your grandma, your brother, sister, family members, anybody who you're in spiritual partnership with, that when you do it is understanding that when the ego does show up, okay, the ego, the personality, right? And the personalities that I'm talking about are, the archetypes that show up within us. When those show up and they have the need to be right, look good, prove a point, right? That we start to remember that that's ego, and that the ego will tear down the very dynamics of the connection to God that you guys have. So it's how do we work through those things and then come back to harmony and peace. Now, it's not that we're never going to experience it. It's about being able to communicate and articulate from your authentic self. This takes a lot of skill on both people's part, especially if you're going to continue to co-create. The articulation of what's uncomfortable, to be able to communicate if something shows up, like, feeling attacked or feeling like you're unworthy, or, being able to dig deep into yourself. And these are the type of spiritual partnerships that help you grow and get closer to God for your own personal self. So it becomes a personal mission to connect deeper into God, or tap into God a little bit deeper. Okay. Cheers. I like how I'm talking to myself. There's like absolutely nobody on here. It's awesome. It's the first time I think ever that I've had both the Podbean and the Facebook Live with 0 people. God's like, girlfriend, you're going to talk to yourself for a while about this, which is fine. It's fine. Because it helps me to get a little bit clearer, dig a little bit deeper, and then also hopefully support you guys with understanding co-creation. So there's going to be new things that arise here. and we're working it out. We're trying to understand how to engage that, what that would look like. I will be introducing the individual soon. And then when that individual shows up, they will have their own platform to engage with the viewers about, you know, their spiritual practice and what they do to connect to God and stay in God's mission, and, you know, what their gifts are. And again, this is a open invitation for people who want to share their spiritual gifts. This is Spirit and Coffee is about community. It's about people. It's about, and it's not just about me. Of course, I've been doing it by myself for a long time, but well, with the participation of you guys showing up as well. So co-creation, healing through the chakras. Again, it's a healing part and aspect of life, to be able to be in connection with other people and to support the healing of all yourself, as well as the healing of our families, as well as the healing of our communities, as well as the healing of the world and the cosmos and everything else. It just naturally heals when we heal. And so it's really focusing on ourselves. And then when we're with another individual, it's asking them, how can I support you, right? And the ebb and flow. So the giving and the receiving, which I think is big. And I can tell you from my own personal experience. Hi, Sandra. Good morning. What happened with the co-creation. So I'm just trying to learn. I feel like such a baby when it comes to this stuff. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with being a beginner and learning from, you know, baseline, because that's what any good practitioner is going to do. Anybody you follow, a good practitioner is always going to be a beginner. They're not going to be sitting on a high chair in authority, pointing fingers and telling you what to do. They're going to really say, okay, we're in this together. So how do we figure this out together? How do we co-create together? Now, one thing I am learning, as I was saying, in co-creation is the give and the receive. That has to happen. So there's a bunch of other things. And I know that there was this guy, and I never read the book, but someone had told me there was a book written about how two individuals come together, and if certain things don't jive with one another, then it sort of separates. And so it's like the religion, the finances, the something else, like those, if those key components weren't like synergized together, then they would definitely end up like, you know, in any relationship, just not talking, or there'd be tons of conflict. It would just be hard. So we can look at it from that perspective. The one thing that I typically look at, especially if it's like a student who says, hey, I want to go deeper and dive deeper, and I'm going to take on students, right, is to understand what practices that they want to do. Are they committed to being a beginner? Are they committed to doing the alchemic process? Are they okay with being little spiritual alchemists and understanding what that process even means, and how do we engage in it? Because the alchemic process constantly is happening over and over and over and over. It's just natural law, right? It's God's law, really, in motion is what I should say. So when people say, well, what's your religion? I say, I don't have a religion. I'm an alchemist. I'm a spiritual alchemist. Well, what does that mean? That means that I follow God's law. What is God's law? Well, natural law is God's law. What is natural law? Well, when we start to look at everything around us, it's everything but what we put words on it, but it's not the law, okay, that we normally think of, which is man-made law. If we follow God's law, we would never break any of the man-made laws at all. It just wouldn't happen. There would be no harm, because everything works in harmony, right? Everything is working in coexistence together. But we ourselves, we pull ourselves away from the harmony, and we cause harm on ourselves. Okay. So, and it's kind of funny, harmony. I'm going to have to look that up now, because I'm like, maybe harmony is something else. Maybe it's balance or flow. But it's natural law. So in the alchemic process, and when we're practicing spiritual alchemy, we're always the beginner. We're always looking to something new. We're never the know-it-alls. Good morning, Nisha, because we understand that in spiritual alchemy, there is one process that starts it all, and that's the fool. And the fool is the open space. So if I ever said I was a fool, people, no, you're not a fool. Oh, yes, I am. I'm a fool. Not a fool as though I'm dumb. Not a fool as though you're going to dupe me and trick me. No, not like that. The fool as in though I am nothing and everything, in that I am full potential, in that I can open my vessel to be everything and nothing at the same time. So the fool just says, I don't know anything. I just don't know it. Like I was watching one of my podcasts that I did about a year ago, and I just sometimes I'll listen to myself and be like, wow, that totally, I don't even know that I said that, but good advice, Natalie, because I have to go back and listen to my own self, give my own advice and say, yeah, that's right. Okay, I could practice this again. And somebody said, oh, well, isn't that judgment? Like I said, it's good to be non-judgmental or to step outside of judgment. Well, you were judging. I said, probably I was. I'm not perfect. So when people call me out, I'm like, of course I am. I'm human. I'm not perfect. I'm perfectly imperfect. So yeah, judgment's going to show up. We all judge, but the whole thing behind it is we are not here to judge. So when we do, and if we do judge, or if we do these things where we fall off our practices, it's not the end of the world. It's not like you're going to go to hell. Sometimes we get amnesia. It happens all the time. It happens all the time. And so if it comes out as judgment, it's being self-aware and understanding that it is judgment and calling yourself out and being okay when people call you out and saying, yeah, you're right. It was total judgment. But understanding that and calling it out the way it is at face value, then you can start to untangle that and say, okay, why judgment? Why did that show up? What am I in judgment of? And you can question a little bit deeper. But you're always the fool. You're always starting from the beginning. So, the path to enlightenment, or people say, I'm enlightened. You don't just get to enlightenment and you're enlightened and that's it. No, enlightenment is actually a part of the process, is the presence and awareness that we do fall off and bringing ourselves right back to the light again. It's like an everyday job. It's just like a never ending cycle. It doesn't end here. This is not the place where it ends. Obviously, it's not the place where it ends because our bodies perish here. They don't last forever. But this is a training space to remember over and over again. So when you're working on yourself in the ebb and flow and the giving and the receiving, is looking at the relationships that you currently have, okay? Now, I'm practicing this as personal experience. I wasn't necessarily able to talk about this particular topic only because I hadn't truly experienced it, and now I'm in the experience of it. And I'm in the full, okay? I'm starting at the beginning, baseline for this. It's a new level up. God said, okay, girlfriend, level up. I'm like, okay, God, I'm ready. I think. I'm not. Yes, I am. Oh my God, what's going to happen? Anxiety is what happened. But after the anxiety and the coming back to the heart center with the transmutation center, which is the heart, to breathe in and out, to accept fully what God has given, and then just to be able to move through that and maneuver through that and understand how that dynamic is impacting my life and my experience and what I know, and challenging and taking me to heights that I've never been before, so that I can communicate to the world, okay, here's what's happening. Being 100% authentic about my life, which is what I've done. I literally have zero to hide in my life. I say everything because everything I do is in the name of God. And so for me, I feel like, okay, my intentions are to love and do no harm. And I wouldn't say do no harm. My intentions are to love and to serve humanity. Okay. Those are the intentions, not my purpose, but my intention is to love and serve humanity. Well, my purpose is to love, but to serve humanity is a big piece. How do I serve humanity? How do I heal myself so that I can serve humanity with practices that may heal them? So understanding the co-creation, the ebb and flow, looking at your relationships, understanding every relationship. Is there a giving and receiving, or is it just a you giving and then they receive and they give nothing back? Okay. Or is it just you receive and you're not giving anything back? How does the dynamic look between each individual? Is it a give, receive, give, receive, give, receive, give, receive? And then there's this like flow that just kind of goes like this. And it's like a wave and emotion. Because when that happens, we don't feel like we're taken advantage of. Now, here's the deal. If you give, 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 and I've talked about this before, and you don't feel like you're receiving in return, then you're giving out of the idea that you should receive. And you can do that, but it's only going to cause you suffering in the end, because then the conversation is what I do all this stuff, I do da 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 da, and then and you get trapped, you get caught in a time loop of that conversation where you can't let it go. So I personally, if I feel that way, will not do stuff. I will simply say I don't want to give if I'm not going to receive. Why? Because then I know that the conversation is going to be me having the expectation of receiving. So I give with a good heart. I give when I know that it's not an expectation to get back. If I feel like I need it, I'm going to have an expectation of receiving back, I don't give it. Because that becomes ego. And that's a hard one to do because we want to give, right? But then if we have that conversation of like, well, they didn't do this and they didn't do that, we gave an expectation. We didn't give out of a loving heart. Why? Because we wanted something back in return. Now, getting back, so now I'm going to go a little bit deeper because people say, well, blah, blah. Okay, but getting back or receiving back, sometimes what we receive back we're not grateful for. So there's that as well. So it's looking into that as well. So maybe we're giving. We feel like we're not receiving back, but what we're receiving back, we're not grateful for. So gratitude is a big part of this as well. Little things that matter, having in partnership, it's constantly being like, thank you, I appreciate you, I thank you for doing this for me, da, da, da. It's constantly giving those words of affirmation of gratitude in the support that you receive, the little things. It doesn't even have to be the big things, just tiny little things that sometimes we take for granted. Now, this happens a lot, I think, with relationships that have been around for a long time, right? Where it just becomes like this thing where the gratitude goes away and it's like, oh, it's an expectation. It becomes an expectation of the other individual. Well, nothing should be expected. Nobody has to do anything for anybody. And that's me just being real. No one has to do anything for me. I don't have to do anything for anybody. We do it because we want to, we choose to, we love to. But the expectation will sometimes come, and then sometimes it's like whatever, it's not even, there's no gratitude. It's like, oh yeah, that person's been doing that for years and okay, whatever. No more gratitude. So the gratitude is critical. How do we have gratitude and say thank you, consistently? Thank you for this, thank you for that, thank you, I appreciate you for whatever it was. I appreciate you for, I don't know, taking out the trash. I appreciate you for making coffee. I appreciate you for getting me water. I appreciate you for, thank you for that. I appreciate it. It helped me. Thank you for rubbing my back. Thank you for, little things, opening the car door or opening the door for me. Those little tiny things that add up, and you give thanks and gratitude to that. Sometimes we forget that. Now, what I've seen happen, and this has happened in couples that I think separate, they say, wow, I didn't realize how much that person actually did for me until I was out of the relationship. Because we have this forgetfulness, or the gratitude doesn't seem to be there. So, it's not, I'm not going to say that it's easy. I'm not going to say that it's, I know it's complex. I know it goes deeper than that. So I am going to be coming up with some new information and just really start to embrace a new dynamic in my life. And that new dynamic, I will be sharing with you guys very soon. And hopefully, it'll help the individuals in this world that I never was able to reach. Okay. See, thanks, Nisha. It can be such a challenge. I'm going through something right now related to this. Yeah. And so God is giving me the opportunity to sort of understand co-creation and how you can co-create with an individual. So it's new territory for me. This is all new territory for me. Which I'm excited about because I'm very good at like doing Natalie and being by myself and doing, and and I speak from that place, but I know that it's not 100% realistic for the majority of the population. And I get that. I get that. There's a lot of things that I express on here and say, and it's hard because people have dynamics in their family that I typically don't have, that I normally don't have, which is just me, myself, and me. I have my mom and I have my niece and I have all these things, but it's just me. I do whatever I want. And I understand that there are people who have families. There are people who have husbands and wives and children, and they're doing all this stuff. And so when I speak, it's almost like, yes, I'm speaking, but I'm speaking from just the individual Natalie. And I know that sometimes it can be a challenge to reach individuals who have all this dynamic going on in their life. But like I said, I live with my niece, so I understand children and trying to get them to like clean up after themselves. I don't typically talk about these family type things, right? I talk more about the spiritual connection and how do we communicate to individuals who are sort of not picking up their stuff. Our children. How do we raise a Padawan, baby Padawans, little spiritual creatures to come up in the world, right? That becomes a little bit challenging. So I've been through that, even though it's not my child. It is because I support her in growing up. Good morning. I think that's Jennifer. So can I share something? You can always share something, Nisha, like always and forever. That's what this is about. The more authentic, the more vulnerable, the easier it is to get through. So, my mom, I help my mom. So I live with my mom and I'm helping her remodel our house, and I'm helping her I cook for her and I do all this stuff for her. I'm helping take care of her so that she doesn't feel like the load is all on her. And really helping her remodel this house because it's what she wants. And so I'm giving back to my mom, basically. I'm serving my mom, giving back to her, and trying to figure out how to support her. So I understand that dynamic. But relationship stuff, not necessarily a place that I've really treaded upon. Just relationship or co-creation with another individual spiritually, from that dynamic or anything, not even understanding it, not even, I'm convoluted is what I would say. Everything was convoluted. And now, right, I'm at the point where God is saying, okay, you get to express and communicate and understand this dynamic. And so I am. And I'm just following God's instructions, perhaps being able to support that dynamic of individuals who have families and are married and are couples and are that kind of thing, because I think the majority of the population is there, and I'm about 1% of the population who is not. But really now starting to engage in the understanding of what that might look like, right? And understanding and going through it. So soon to come, more information and me really understanding it and being able, good morning, Spooky, good morning, Ellen, being able to communicate to you guys what that might look like, especially for those who are looking for relationships, right? The ones that really want to be in partnership with somebody, Okay, most people are asking for that dynamic, and so you guys can like give a thumbs up on Facebook if that's something that you want, is relationships and to be with somebody and find somebody and have a healthy relationship with another, with a partner and all those things. You know, if that's something that you guys are wanting and actively looking for, you know, then I can support you. Okay, let's see what she says. So this is what Anisha says on the Podbean for those on Facebook Live. I took in my relative who went down a path like a lot of us do as a young person. She attempted suicide and got into some difficult things. I let her stay with me with the notion that she gets herself on her feet, but now I'm concerned because it's getting challenging to go through this with her. And I'm concerned that she's not ready to be on her own, but I'm moving in the next couple of months to get away. Okay, let's see, difficult notion that she gets herself. I'm trying to be kind and supportive as I see myself in her as a younger person. Awesome. Well, first of all, Nisha, thank you for sharing. Secondly, that sounds like a very challenging situation to be in. I can share from my own personal experience that I've had two of really good friends of mine commit suicide, and I would say maybe more than that because I've had friends die of drug addiction and stuff like that, which can be considered suicide, right? Obviously, they didn't want to live, or they would have taken care of their health and their body. So I can relate. One thing I can say from my own personal perspective is that we don't have the power, and this is the hard part for most people to hear. We don't have the power to change the mindset of somebody who doesn't value their life. We cannot do, I don't have the power to do that ever. I've tried. Trust me, if I could save the world, I would. That is not my power. I don't have the power to save the world. You know, and that's where we leave it to God. So for me, understanding this, because I understand the guilt that comes behind, you know, the guilt that comes behind survival's, you know, guilt or whatever it is that comes from all that, right? I've had a lot of death in my life, and not just from, you know, friends, but my high school sweetheart and everything. So I've had a lot of death in my life. I've experienced this quite a bit, actually. And the thing with it is that people, individuals, have to understand that their power comes from within them. So if somebody's in a situation where they don't value their life, it's because they don't value themselves. And they probably don't have any spiritual practices. Maybe they do. I can't say 100% they don't, okay? But looking at and going to God and trusting God. So sometimes people have to hit rock bottom in order to understand their purpose. People without purpose, people without God, people without faith tend to be a little bit more left brain, or they tend to be more mechanical, or if they're right brain, tend to be more emotional and apathetic. Sometimes people, and I'm just going to go through a slew of different things. Sometimes people that are emotional feel too much and don't know how to set boundaries too. So that's another issue that shows up with people, or they don't feel like they're valuable enough, and the abandonment issues. So it just depends on what the issue is for the individual, and them reclaiming that for themselves, understanding that they have the power. So basically they're giving their power over to the situation that they're in rather than claiming their power and then driving that energy into something they care about. So purpose is a big part of this. So having this individual understand what is their purpose. Do they have a purpose? What do they enjoy doing? What are their hobbies? What would get them moving and energized in a direction that's powerful, and they can redirect the emotional state that they're in into something else. Also, it's the duality of it. What is this individual? So basically, Nisha, what I'm saying is questions are powerful. Questions to individuals are powerful because it puts them on a quest to find themselves, to find God. It leads them down that journey. That's all we can do is facilitate a question. Literally, that's it. We can plant seeds. We can give advice to people. We can say, hey, you should do this. That doesn't mean anything because the individuals say, yeah, that sounds great, but they ain't going to do it. So it's really identifying what would they do for themselves? What is their practice? How do we dig a little deeper into that? We can plant seeds, but if we want the seed to grow, we ask powerful questions. So that's part of it. It's not giving advice. I know that's a hard one. The person that I'm talking about that we're, working on Spirit and Coffee together, I said this morning, this is what I said this morning to this individual. I said, look, as a teacher, okay, because I get in teacher mode too. I said, as a teacher of spiritual practice, there are two things, okay, two things that I would give as advice, okay, take it or not. And yes, this is advice, but this is what I've learned, okay, to be an effective teacher, to help people understand how to get out of the entanglement of their own mind. I said, number one, patience. Number two, shut the F up. Me, shut the F up. Like Natalie, shut up and listen. Just listen. Don't give advice, because when we listen to individuals, they start to hear their own internal conversations. They start to recognize what they're saying and they're like, wait, what? And it like jolts them out of like, what am I even talking about? So if you're in a situation where somebody's crying out for you, rather than interrupt them, rather than try to give them advice, just let them talk. Just sit in silence and don't even, if you can clear your mind of any kind of response or judgment and just sit there in generous listening to an individual, they will come up with the answer for themselves. We don't have to give them answers. Because why? Because people are powerful enough. They have the answers within themselves. The answer comes from internally. It doesn't come from the external. We can view the external, but we know that the answer lies within our heart, and that's the spiritual connection. That's the connection to God and faith, where we experience love, or we experience frustration or anger to get to the root of it, or abandonment or rejection or whatever this person is experiencing, to get to the point where they don't even want to live anymore. Why? Why does this person not want to live? What is it? What's the root of it? They're going to give you a story, of course. Oh, poor me, and this happened to me, and and then people interrupt and say, well, that happened to me too. That's not going to help them. Yeah, we've all been through shit. I've been through shit. I'm not going to sit here and so again, it's letting them just communicate. Let them communicate. I've been through this. I've been through that. Ask them questions. I just ask questions. I'm like, okay, so what about this? Well, what about that? And I'm really curious. Like, honestly, it comes from a place of true curiosity that I want people to know and understand the dynamic of how someone could come to the point where they don't even think their life is valuable. I don't get it. So for me, because I don't understand it, I'm curious about it and I want to understand why. Like, why? How could you come to that place where you think you're not worthy enough of living, where you think you're not worthy enough of having abundance, where you think you're not worthy enough of living another day? What is going on? Truly. And I guarantee you it's past traumas. But in the aspect of that is facilitating a place for them to reclaim their power. How can they reclaim their power over it? And not let that power be taken, because it was taken. They feel like it was taken, but it's not. The power wasn't taken from them. They gave it to whoever it was. They're giving their power away. That's what happens. People give their power away rather than reclaiming their power and standing up firm in their own birthright and saying, you know what? I am powerful. I reclaim that. whether it be abuse. We have people who've been abused mentally, physically, emotionally abused. Everybody's gone through shit. We all have. I promise you, everybody has. Everybody has a story. Everybody's gone through some weird shit. Everybody has been, I mean, there's been people who have been raped, molested, beat down. There's been domestic violence, mental violence. There's been drug use and drug abuse, and all of these things have happened. They're in everybody's world because this world is that way. It is a very real thing. But it's not that all that murky stuff that's inside that's happened, that's not who we truly are. So we have to reclaim it and not give it power, but reclaim our power, reclaim our space, reclaim our vessel, our body. Remember that in the eyes of God, we are worthy. That God says we are worthy or we wouldn't be here. So I hope that helps, Nisha. And what I would say is if anything, you know, and I don't know the individual, I don't know if she's open to like seeing somebody, like not a psychiatrist, but like a coach, or going to somebody who would just listen to her and just listen and understand and try to dive deep to the root of the cause that has led her to this particular point in time where she thinks that she's not worthy of life. That makes me cry to my core, that someone could think that they are not enough to live when they probably are talented and have so much to give back to the world. But it's a reclamation of taking back your power. How? Questions, powerful questions. That's how we do it. We facilitate powerful questions. Now, on your end, Nisha, you are not, again, responsible for whatever happens with this individual. You cannot be responsible. You can support and you can love and you can give everything that you can give, but the choice is not yours. The person, if a person takes their life, that was not your choice, that was their choice. You can't put that on you. I know, I've been through it. What could I have done different? How could I have done? I couldn't have done anything different. I did everything that I possibly could. It was their choice. I couldn't take that choice away from them. Hard reality to live into. That's a hard one. It's not an easy one. I know. In fact, I have the ashes of one of my very best friends, my blood brother. We were kids and we grew up together and we were always together. And he was so sensitive and he was my little Eckies is what I called him. And he always was so empathetic. Like he felt everything to the core. Everything was so sad for him, and he felt people's pain, and he didn't know how to set boundaries for himself. And he used to always tell me, "You're so strong. How are you so strong? How do you do this and that?" And I would try to help him and show him and love him. And I even bought a drum set for the guy. I bought him a whole drum set because I thought if he redirected his energy into drums, because he was a great drummer, and we started a band together, that was going to fix it. And it didn't fix it. It didn't. I couldn't fix it. It wasn't up to me to fix. So I've had a lot of those before. And he had the drum set and everything, and he ended up taking his life anyway. About 3 years ago. And he just couldn't handle it. And a lot of it was self-worth. You know, he didn't think he was worthy. He wasn't enough, but I couldn't make him believe he was enough. That wasn't my responsibility. I tried everything I could, but I've learned. But I, in my heart of hearts, know that I did everything that I possibly could as a friend to support him. And he loved me and I loved him. And I think that was enough for him, that he at least knew that someone loved him unconditionally without judgment. You know, he told me how he would kill himself before he did it. He told me, okay? So I'm being very vulnerable and open with you about what I've been through. Okay. So there are things that have happened in my life. I don't sit here and talk about those things all the time, right? Because why? Well, because first of all, when you guys ask me questions, it helps me to open up those parts of myself. Otherwise, I just teach. How do you overcome these barriers? How did I overcome the death of my very best friend? How did I allow myself to heal around that? Is it still there? Yeah. Do I still cry? Yes. Do I still think of him? Yes. Do I have his ashes with me? And sometimes I hold him and I cry and I say, I love you. And I just have to remember that I couldn't have saved him. It wasn't up to me to save him. He had to save himself. Okay. I think honestly, I did not know how hard this would be, which lets me know how silly I was and how much I burdened other people by issues with myself in past trauma. I see so much pain, it resonates, but I also see how silly it was. I'm sorry to hear that. Thank you for being vulnerable. Absolutely, Nisha, of course. And I'm glad that you found the silliness in it too, because life isn't that serious. I mean, we make it so serious that we bog ourselves down, and that's the other side of it, right? That we can look at life and say, okay, this too shall pass. Why am I making a big deal? But we get so attached to our stories about what has happened to us, you know, and we dig deeper and deeper and deeper. And before you know it, we're just like attached to it so much so that we identify with that story and it becomes our everything. And we don't know how to have another story to create something different. So there's a lot to unpack. I know that I'm just going off of what you said, and I don't know if I'm hitting the points of what you're going through. I just know what I've gone through. And, you know, for me, it's like, I don't know 100% no, because it's a one kind of it's a two-sided, but more one-sided kind of conversation, which I don't know if that's a possibility to have a one-sided conversation. But at least able to share the experience and understanding of the psyche of the human mind and how the mind trips us up and how we think that we can save people, but we can't because we think that it's our job and it's not. Our job is merely to love or whatever your purpose is, but to love, to support. I stay in non-attachment. That's why my best friend, Eric, told me everything. He told me everything. He never had a filter. He told me everything he was doing all the time. And he said, thank you, right? Because I didn't judge him for it. I was like, I'm not here to judge you. I can't judge you for it. I love you no matter what. It hurts me to my core. Like there's that pain inside me that I want you to love yourself. And so there you go. So hopefully that helps. I think, you know, again, powerful questions for this individual, supporting them and getting help. But remember, Nisha, the choice that they make is not yours. You don't have the power to change the choice that they want to make. Now, you know what choice you want them to make. You want them to live. And so you're going to constantly be feeding them life rather than death. But you can't help it if they feed themselves death. That's not, it's just not up to you. And that's the hardest thing to understand, I know. I pray for the individual, because like, again, I don't understand how someone can come to the conclusion that they don't matter. They matter, and she matters. And hopefully one day God will remind her that she matters and will touch her heart, and that it'll open up and she'll say, wow, I matter. I matter. Sometimes people will hit rock bottom before that happens. And then boom, all of a sudden God touches their heart and they wake up and they're like, whoa, what? And they change their life. They reclaim their power again. They don't identify with the story that put them in that space. So I pray for her. I pray for you, Nisha, for your healing, for your understanding, for you to not be so maybe hard on yourself about this situation and know that you've done your best and everything that you can. But also remember that you can heal through the fact that you know it's not your choice. You can only love. Your intention is to feed her life, right? And that's all you need to know between you and God, is that life is what you're feeding her. And hopefully she'll eat from the tree of life, and that she'll stay and remain in this world so that she can continue finding her divine purpose and her need to, or her gifts to give back to the world. I bet she's talented, I'm guessing. I know that people that are really emotional like that tend to be very creative. Sometimes their emotions are too high. And they need to get a little bit more organized. Maybe they need some of that divine masculine, divine will and fire in their belly to get them going. And that's reclaiming their power. The power lies in the fire energy, the divine will that I talked about. If you looked at the chakra system, it's the solar plexus, where we reclaim our fire energy, our power, where we rise as queen, where we rise as king, where we rise up into our divine purpose, and we take our staff and we move forward and we say, I will no longer be driven by this story. Emotions, when they overtake us, they drown us, basically, because if you think about water and emotion, it drowns us, and we can't swim, we can't rise above. It's too much. Fire. So, if you want, Nisha, why don't you look at your fire? Because sometimes that helps too. It's like, well, how do I help? Well, I heal myself, right? I heal myself. So if I look at somebody, and I'll leave on this note because it's been really long, but thank you, Nisha, is that I'll look at myself. So if I see someone like super emotional, right, I look at myself and say, where am I not showing up? Or where am I being so emotional that I'm allowing stories to lead me rather than standing firm in my power and reclaiming my power? Where am I not reclaiming my power? And I do it for myself. I don't point fingers and tell them you need to reclaim your power. I reclaim my own power. Where am I in my life am I not reclaiming my power? Oh, there. Okay, let me do that. And then when I do, as within, so without, I start to see people around me start to reclaim their power. It's just like an energy shift. So that's the question I would leave you with, Nisha, is where do you get to reclaim your power? Where do you get to reclaim your fire, your staff, your divine right? Where you get to restart to co-create in your divine will. Okay, that's my question for you. And you don't have to write on this question, but just be in it. If you don't know right now, it's okay. You don't have to. Just be in the question. Where do I get to reclaim my fire, my power? Okay. I hope that helps. Yes, powerful, good, awesome. Thank you for sharing. Again, I pray for her. I pray that she reclaims her power as well. I pray that everybody reclaim it. Go reclaim your power today, people. Yeah. I'm going to reclaim my power in the kitchen because I'm going to be cooking, and that's what I want to be doing. My divine will and purpose is to make healthy, yummy food. And get very clear about this co-creation stuff. Also, I have a really exciting news that I'm sure is going to be coming up soon, but I'm not going to give it until it happens. So I just be on the lookout for that. So anywho, I love you guys. Have a wonderful, beautiful day. May God be in your heart. May you feel the abundance of God's love and joy and gratitude and happiness and bliss within you. And may your day just be powerful. Okay. Love you very much. Have a good day. Bye.